Welcome to the Brave Women at Work podcast. This is your host, Jen Pasticas. I'm so glad you're here. With the Brave Women at Work podcast, you'll get the resources and tips along with real-world stories and humor to empower and inspire you to take bolder and braver actions in your career and life. Welcome to the Brave Women at Work podcast. This is your host, Jen Pasticas. I'm so glad you're here. Well, hey everyone, how are you doing out there? So let's start by saying happy spring to everyone that's in the Northern Hemisphere. I live in the Chicago area, so I am so happy. It's so funny. If anyone else sees a lot of darkness, I'm thinking of Seattle, I'm thinking of other places that have long winters. We're starting to have slightly warmer. By means, I'm going to use the Fahrenheit here, like 45, 50, and it's like a heat wave. So slightly warmer, slightly longer days. So there is literally light at the end of the tunnel. But I will say, so we had snow here in my area, even in March 2025, as I'm recording this. So, like, fingers crossed, everybody, that we are done with that business because I don't know. I'm done with it. I want it to be over. So I hope that you have some good weather wherever you are, if not now, really, really soon, because I think that it makes a difference. I think that it definitely impacts our mood and just productivity and everything. And I love some good cold weather and some winter, but I'm done now. So if you didn't listen to one of my January episodes, it's one of the ones, maybe the first one of the year in 2025. I mentioned that my words of the year for this year in 2025 are two. So energy and woo. I couldn't decide. So it's kind of split. So energy and woo. So I have met a guest. I've called it in, everyone. I love this person. I love this guest, Jayne Warrilow. She's a former corporate executive. She's now a founder and CEO of Sacred Changemakers, her business. And I have learned through this conversation, which I so loved, that you can indeed mix corporate life and woo in one. I've always kind of kept that side of myself like separated. And then it was like the corporate Jen and the woo Jen. And I'm like, no, like Jayne showed me in this conversation. She's like, no, like you bring it all, and there's a place for all of that. And it was just so refreshing to talk so freely about energy and other spiritual concepts intermingled with leadership, which I've never done on the show before. And I was just so excited to dive into it with Jayne. So during our conversation, we chatted about what is a sacred change maker, and think about how bold and brave Jayne was to even use the word sacred in her business name. And she talks a little bit about that. How did Jayne's health journey with cancer and her healing lead her to do this work? How Jayne protects her energy as a channel, which we've never talked about on the show, just because we talk about more leadership, corporate things, and we'll always continue to do that. But just as like a slight bend, like she talks about her work as a channel and how she leverages it in her work with leaders and how they embrace it and accept it. Super interesting how she mixes in the sacred with leadership in her work with, like I said, leaders, managers, corporations. And she also works with entrepreneurs, like the gamut, right? But we talk about the corporate world a lot on this show. What resonant codes are and how we can discover our own. So new term, resonance codes, and we have kind of part of our conversation goes there, which is really interesting, and so much more ground that we cover. So, if you are into the idea of mixing the sacred, the spiritual, or woo with leadership, you're going to love, with a capital L, this conversation. So, here is more about Jayne. Jayne Warrilow is a global speaker, best-selling author, and sought-after business and executive coach who is passionate about building the foundations of a more equitable, loving, and resonant world. Jayne is an incredibly curious human who likes to push the membrane of possibility in our world. That is so amazing. She is devoted to making an unprecedented impact, financial, human, and social in all of those areas. For nearly 30 years, Jayne has brought purpose to business and guided the transformation of iconic businesses alongside extraordinary leaders. And here are three things that I know Jayne believes. Who we are being matters. What we stand for matters. Who we partner with matters. And as Jayne says, these are soul defining times in our history, and the decisions we make today will shape our collective future. So, if the podcast Brave Women at Work has helped you or made an impact in your work or your life, please be sure to share it with a family member, a friend, or a colleague. And as you know, and I say every week, I wish that it didn't matter, but it does matter. Your ratings and reviews will help this show get in the hands of more women worldwide. I just checked and we continue to hover around 34 countries around the globe. I am so humbled, everybody, y'all, by that figure. So I want to get to 35, 36, not just because, it's good for the brand, right? But it's good for us to get this information in the hands of more women. Also, if you haven't yet downloaded my freebies from my website, they are 24 career and leadership affirmations, 5 ways to managing your imposter syndrome, and getting paid 10 negotiation tips. You can find out all about them at bravewomenatwork.com. One last announcement. So I am asking all of you, and it's been a tough year so far for women in general. I think around the globe. It's just been a tough year to just get started, period. But I'm asking all of you to consider investing in yourself this year and attend the Thrive in 25 conference from June 25th through 28th here in Chicagoland, right in my backyard. This conference is different than other conferences on purpose that I have ever attended. It's a 12-month experience post-conference. You have 2.5 days of 18, I didn't say that wrong. 18 speakers are going to be sharing their wisdom with you and other guests during the conference. And I'm just going to share, we have an Emmy Award winner, we have TEDx speakers, we have CEOs, we have business owners, like really running the gamut. I mean, the amount of experience is kind of mind blowing. But after that, what makes it different is it's a 12-month post-conference support experience. So it's going to include 6+ months of coaching accountability. It would be in a group called the Brave Circle, which you've heard on the podcast if you are a longer term listener with yours truly. A 12-month membership in her C-Suite, which is a powerful women's networking platform, and a 12-month membership to Innovation Women, which is a female-led speakers bureau. So we can get more women on stages. So like I said, I don't know about you, but I've never been to a conference that pours that much into attendees. And so typically for me, it's been, I get really excited about the ideas. I get back into my normal life and then they kind of like fritter away, unfortunately, right? Sometimes I implement, but many times I just don't have the support or the time to implement. So, not for Thrive in 2025. We really want to walk alongside you to incorporate your learnings from the conference, both personally and professionally. So again, I am going to welcome you to invest in yourself today. You can learn more about the conference and register at www.thrive-in25.com. Again, that's thrive-in25.com. All right, let's welcome Jayne to the show. Well, hello, Jayne. Welcome to Brave Women at Work. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing really well. I'm so excited to talk to you, Jen. Thank you so much for this invitation.
Oh, of course. So everyone, you don't know why Jayne and I are so excited, but we've had like so much of one another this very week. So I don't do this very often, like where I do like a podcast like share in the same week. It usually doesn't work out that way. But we had so much fun on, what was it, Tuesday, that we're back on
Yeah.
Thursday. Here we are recording. All the goodness all the time. So I always start with this question, and you can take it wherever you would want to take it. But I'd love to know more and have my listeners know more about you, Jayne, your background story, and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Gosh, how long have you got, Jen?
The whole hour if you need it. No, no, we can't wait that long. No, no, no.
So, my gosh, I have been working in leadership and change, mainly in corporate life, I think, for nearly 3 decades now. And I started life out really in England, as you can probably hear from my accent, but I've been in the US now for 16 years. And I started out in leadership and then moved into training and then into coaching and consulting, and actually worked for a global consultancy where I really started to hone what it was that I wanted to do. And one of the things that I know that I love and have become over the years very practiced at is change itself. So I
Mm,
now am into my legacy work at this stage in my life, which is called Sacred Changemakers, which I founded in 2019. And this is really where I brought a lot of my different worlds together. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is I'm something of an edge walker. I always have been. I kind of on the edges of different worlds, and I'm very good at integrating and synthesizing the best out of those worlds. And what do I mean by that? Well, in my private life, in my own kind of my own interests, my own hobbies, I've been on a spiritual path from being very, very young. And the reason for that was I have some psychic gifts that were given to me from my grandmother. It actually skipped a generation. My mum didn't get it, but I did. And nobody really understood. My grandma died when I was very young, and nobody really understood, and I didn't understand what this was, but it was
mm,
very alive for me. So it put me on a bit of a spiritual path. And of course, being like raised in England, I grew up as a Christian. But then I started to look out at other religions. I've deep dived into Buddhism, into Vedanta, into many different, like, the Tao, different ways, different ancient wisdom traditions. And I became a spiritual healer. I became a channel. I became a medium. I became all these things because in England, this is quite a tradition. And I also became a witch, which I didn't tell you when we spoke. Uh,
Oh,
but
wow.
this was all
Okay.
in my younger years, and it's not something I practice today, but it's part of the Celtic tradition, and it's pretty easy to find if you live in England. So, and the part of England I was in, it was very alive and well, and so I've been into all these mystical traditions, and then for work I was doing leadership and business, got my master's degree in leadership development and organizational development, and so the two worlds didn't think that they would ever come together. But they did when I actually had a terminal diagnosis. I was running a seven-figure business consultancy, leadership consultancy business at the time out of London that worked with a lot of global leaders and senior executive teams. And we were running leadership development programs for some really big, iconic global companies. And going back to work after I'd healed myself was like walking into the living dead. And at that point, I knew that all the work that I knew from the wisdom traditions on consciousness needed to be mapped against leadership. And that started to happen around 2004. And so that was when my body of work on resonance began, really
Mm,
mapping energy and the inner work of leadership into the development and the coaching that I was doing at that time. And then another awakening moment happened in 2019 when my granddaughter was born, my first granddaughter, and I was there at the birth. And during that time, as I kind of held her for the first time in my hands, she's Hispanic and she's female. And I just realized this was not the world I wanted my granddaughter to grow up in. And it forced me into a place where I reflected back on my career. And yes, from the outside looking in, I'd been very successful. But had I really made a difference? And is the external definition of success the one that I wanted to embrace? And I realized no, it's not.
mm,
Because the changes that we're taught are very, in the Western world at least, they're very oriented towards the individual and what they want. And I realize that in the times we're living through now, we need a bigger approach to change. We need to bridge from the individual and what they want to the collective and what's necessary today, from particularly from people in leadership roles. And I feel that business and leadership, in a way, is the biggest lever for change we have in our world to
Hmm.
shape a different future that could be more resonant, more equal for all of us. And that's important to me. So that's why Sacred Changemakers begins.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Wow. There's so much. I'm like, where do I go? Like, I have a million questions here. Okay. So we're going to have to talk again. I'm sorry. We're going to have to talk again somehow. Okay. So you had said your legacy, your legacy work. So would you say it was the catalyst was having your granddaughter in your hands? Was that when your legacy work was born, or was it already kind of brewing?
Oh, it was already brewing. And the way I'll describe it so the listeners can understand is really, what I was doing was in my consulting and coaching practice, I was selling like what people wanted, and then I'd go in and do the real work, kind of get underneath the surface, because of course this work was before its time in 2004. And so I was kind of going a little bit under the radar. So in 2019, and starting Sacred Changemakers felt like coming out of the closet in a way. I felt like it was time now to be more bold, more courageous, and speak to what is really my truth in a way. And so that's what I've been doing since 2019. So yes, I was doing that work. I was mapping consciousness. I was waking people up. That was part of the leadership work. But now it's taken to a whole different level because I've kind of broken through the fear that I had that, like, if I started talking to leaders about being psychic, right, and mapping consciousness, they suddenly, it's like, oh no, that's too woo woo for us. We need logical, rational, scientific mindset. Where's the data that backs this up kind of approach? Because that's what is still alive in many organizations today. And I thought if I came out there, they'd put me in a box with the angel lady over here and I'd lose all my authority. So that's what I thought. And actually, I'm sure you may have some listeners that are also feeling that they've got some truths that they want to express through their work and their leadership. And I would say do it, because when I did, I didn't have the response that I thought I would. Actually, people are saying to me, some of them still quite quietly, but they're saying this is exactly what we need. And so that has just been so refreshing. I feel the tide is turning.
Oh, that was my follow-up question is it sound, I just as you're saying this, I'm afraid, right? I'm afraid for
Yeah.
you that you're like, oh yeah, I'm a channel, and I'm going into companies. And I'm like, uh-oh, like, is the door going to be shown to you? But it sounds like no, like it was the exact opposite, that you were blending the
Yeah.
spiritual and business, the woo and logic, or whatever business logic is. Am I hearing that correctly?
You are. And one of the things that's really helped is we do the language that we use to describe this kind of work now has kind of been evolving. So we're all very familiar with purpose-driven like companies, purpose-driven leadership, purpose-driven businesses. And what's interesting is since COVID, we have had an awakening that's being driven by customers and consumers.
Mm,
They're looking for more meaning in the marketplace now. So I am still very careful about the language that I use,
hmm.
but I do meet people where they are. I'm not staying up in my like lofty spiritual cloud up here talking there. And this is one of the keys of resonance in a way, which was my earlier body of work, which is now fully integrated into what I do. And it's this idea that I'm the bridge. I don't just want to work with the people in that run a B Corp or are in conscious capitalism because they already get it. I want to work at the edges where people don't get it yet, because that's where I can have the most impact. So, yes, I'm prepared to go in and be the bridge. I'll use their language. I'll speak to things that matter to them because they do and they're still important in the work. But it's like a yes and conversation now. It's not the polarities of, am I going to be for profit or am I going to be not for
Mm,
profit? It's
hmm.
how do I sit somewhere in the middle path, the middle way, which
Hmm.
is very much a spiritual kind of way that people have known for centuries.
So it's interesting. So Do you almost, because you have a channel, you're a channel and you have psychic gifts and things like that. So do you kind of feel into those conversations when you go into organizations? You almost kind of have like different shades of awakening. So you know kind of maybe what language to use with people. Like, do you just kind of have you kind of feel into it?
I do, and that's one of the things that I teach in the resonance codes is 9 levels of resonance. And these
Mm,
9 levels, when I say that, it sounds like, oh, it's just another theory, and it kind of is. But what it speaks to is we all live in very different worlds. And so when you think about communication, every level on the full spectrum of resonance has its own language, its own emotions, its own challenges, its own potential. It has all of that. So I teach how to read
mm,
energy. And the truth is, we all read energy. We're all intuitive. We all know that there's a deeper space inside of us that kind of intuitively gives us messages where we know and we can't not know because it's not our head that's figuring stuff out. There's a place in us where we do know. So if I can, like, when you speak truth to people, the
mm-hmm,
simple thing is the truth resonates. And we're all aware that we read energy. Like when there's some people that walk into a room and when they walk in, everybody's head turns. And they might even have their back to them, but you feel the presence of someone coming into a room, right? And
mm,
presence itself is a very rare thing in leadership terms, particularly in business terms. So if we can cultivate that, if we can not just figure things out from our heads, yes, that's important, but there's if we can connect to all of us, right? And really get a sense of what does it mean to connect with myself so I can show up whole and in presence? And therefore, then, what I do is I allow other people in. I allow them to be perfectly themselves. I don't need them to change to communicate with me. They can be fully themselves, and I can be fully myself, and we can connect and have a usually a much deeper conversation.
hmm. So, okay, so resonance, what I'm hearing, because there's a lot of new terminology. I'm kind of like breaking it down for
Yes.
everybody, right?
Thank you,
We're like,
Jen.
what are we talking about here? But like everyone's like, I thought this was just Brave Women at Work podcast. So, so is resonance in your mind equating energy, right? Is resonance like the energy of a person, or what does the definition of resonance mean?
Resonance is about connection. It's about
Connection.
the quality of connections that we have with ourselves first. That's the 9 levels.
Okay.
It's actually linked to the chakra system. So
Okay.
there's a lot of bodies of work that have gone into this as well. But it's mapping our development. At what level have we been socialized to? And if I speak culturally in terms of the modern world, we get to about level 3. If we're a male in the modern world, we get to a 3. And if we have conscious parents or we find ourselves in situations where maybe we do follow some kind of religion, we might get up to level 4, which is the heart. But
Mm-hmm.
level 3 is very much about I'm confident, I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to go out into the world and do it. But usually, this, you can see my body shape. This is how
Mm-hmm.
we hold energy, is in our body shape. And so you can see by this, I'm actually putting on a mask in a way.
Mm.
I'm actually putting a mask over what I don't like inside that I haven't connected to, the shadow side of me that I've pushed away, the things I don't like about myself. I don't want others to see them, so I put a mask up. But once we go from level 3 to 4, we're moving up into the heart. This is where we care now. The heart gets engaged at level 4. And so this is where a lot of women in the modern world get
Mm.
to, is because they're nurturing, they care about what other people think of them, they care about the quality of their work, they care about how they show up to the world and how they lead. So
Mm-hmm.
that's level 4, you see. And so what I'm doing is just putting language to really what we already know, because people, because it's an ascension model, right?
Of
People, we're
course.
already conditioned to think that the top's the best in the West. because that's what we think. We think if there's a model and there's like, 9 levels, well, I want to be at the top because we're socialized culturally into wanting to get to the top. It's the
Mm.
American dream, right? We want to get to the top. But actually, in this model, it doesn't matter where you are as long as you're self-aware there. There are different
Hmm.
challenges and different potentials at each level. Nothing is right or wrong. And in fact, if you are at level 8, because it actually starts at 0, and everybody
Hmm.
gets confused with that. But if you're at the top, you don't fit very well into the modern world because you're floating around on a cloud, really, very spiritual, in unity consciousness. And actually getting something done in the modern world is really hard because you
Can you
can't.
vary between the resonance levels? Like, can you actually flow
Yes.
between?
Yes, so there's your development level, which is your natural home frequency. And then there is the full spectrum, which is what I teach, because of course you need the full spectrum, because when you start looking outside of yourself and communicating and connecting with others, you need to be able to recognize where they are so you can meet them where they are. It's such an important skill for leaders that just in communication terms is, can I connect? Am I available for other people to actually connect in with them? And a lot of people, we're so armored up in and that's a kind of a psychological term, but we're armored up because we're trying to protect ourselves from the external world and the other people. And that means it can be really hard to connect. And then there's other people that are very open and they do connect very easily, but sometimes they can be a bit too much about themselves. So it's
Hmm.
really understanding where you are and understanding all the levels so you can move around them because we do every day. I mean, I'm the one that teaches this. Yes, I'm quite aware and practiced at it, but my kids can pull me down to the lower levels faster than anybody else,
You're
right?
like screaming at
Like,
them. You're
it's
like,
like,
wait a
who's
minute.
who's not done the dishwasher? Whose job is it to do the dishwasher? And I get right down into the lower levels.
Seriously. So, okay. So you can, everyone, there is a quiz that we'll put in there. So, it's quiz.sacredchangemakers.com. We'll put it in the show notes. So I'm looking at the scale, right? It's not up or down or whatever. I love that it's just like all horizontal across. That obviously was intentional. I think that I'm hovering between like 5 and 6, right? So like awakening, I'm like baby woo is what I'm saying. I'm baby woo. So, and intuition, like really making friends with my intuition again and how to incorporate it in business, how to incorporate it into leadership. And the reason I'm bringing this up, and I wanted to know if this makes sense to you, Jayne. So I'm working on, I think I told you offline, we'll just say this. I'm working on a very big change management project.
Right.
And I'm sitting with all these people and we're talking and, I'm getting feedback and just listening. And the amount of information, like they don't know me, Jayne, like from anybody, from Amy or Adam, like they don't know me. And it's really interesting because the amount of information and feedback they're giving me is like epic. They're like blah blah blah, like how much time do you have? Like I'm complaining and I'm telling you all my stories. And I don't know if that's because they feel safe and they know I'm not judging them and because I'm at a higher level of resonance, so they don't feel like armored up. But it is almost frightening to me, like how de-armored they are when we're in these conversations. Does that correlate to like what you're talking about?
It absolutely does. And you're right. You sound like you're at the intersection between 5 and 6. So let me explain a little bit about that through the resonance codes to give you some
Okay.
insight. So, first of all, level 4 is your heart. You're very practiced at the heart because you're already above it. So, in many ways, people know you care, right? They know you care, and 4 is taking us beyond judgment. So, they know you care and they know that you're a safe place to be, right? They can share things with you. It's not going to you're not going to be a whistleblower, you're not going to tell, you're not going to judge. So, they're going to speak very openly to you. But then, interestingly, 5. This is the throat chakra. This is where you learn to speak your truth. So, your presence in a room at level 5, Jen, embodies the heart. People know you care. You're a safe space to land for them. So, they'll feel they can be themselves. And most importantly, because your level 5 is active, they see you modeling and embodying a style of leadership where you are utterly yourself. So, they think, that gives them permission to be utterly themselves. And then as
Hmm.
you move into the six now, you're at that 5 to 6 is actually quite a big leap, because 5 to 6, so in level five, it's in a block of three that are actually all about the intellect and kind of leading from the mind, figuring things out, and having a very strong intellect. But what you're at the cusp of is leaving that behind for the intuition. Now, right now, the two are probably playing
Mm-hmm.
equally.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is they're also seeing you trusting yourself, trusting them, trusting the process. Trust is a big piece in the leap from 5 to 6, because unless you trust your intuition, you're not going to just follow it blindly. You're actually still got some of your intellect engaged, meaning that you will actually look for the data that supports the intuitive hits that you get. So you've got this lovely
Mm.
blend. So that shows other people, your presence without what you say and without what you do is embodying a different way of leading that they're responding to. And they may not even be aware that they know all this stuff about you, because they'll feel you. When you speak at this level, they don't just hear your words, they feel what you say. They can find themselves in your stories and your whatever it is that you're sharing. They can see and they know you care. So that's what's coming up.
Okay, so this is really cool. And then we'll finish off on this because I want to make this I always like to boil it down. I've got teaching in my
Mm,
blood, right? So then, like, we have
right.
leaders that are listening, going, like, yeah, like, blah, blah, blah. This is esoteric.
Yeah.
Like, how do I actually apply this, right? So I had one of those folks in these conversations, and this touched me, but you just nailed it on the head. She said, I went home and I told my husband, I had a meeting with these folks, and this particular person said, wow, like it was a really good meeting, and I felt really heard, and I feel like change is really going to happen. Then she calls her mom, she tells me, and her mom's like, why are you talking about work? You never talk about work. And she's like, oh no, this was really important. It was like a watershed meeting, like changes are going to happen. So it actually, what I'm hearing is like my energy is like transferring over in a positive way to them. And it is the ripple in the pond, right? I'm not like ripping a rock in there or a boulder in there. I'm just like waving like a small pebble in the pond and they're receiving it, correct?
Absolutely. One of the ways I describe this is at this level now, your leadership is an invitation to others. That's what it is. You're inviting others in. If you were at level three, you'd be kind of quite dogmatic, telling them the way it's going to be. This is what we're going to do. This is your responsibility. This is mine. Now, up here at 5 to 6, you're inviting them in. You're allowing them space within whatever the process is you're speaking to, for them to be themselves and find themselves and be okay and have their input in what's going on. And that's a very different approach.
Okay, so now let's get it to the practical for a second. So we have, the resonance codes, we have the quiz, we'll put it in the show notes. Go find out, where you are, and there is no right or wrong, right? So if you
Yeah.
find that you're in that level 3, it's okay, right? If you find
Yeah.
you're in a level 8, I kind of want to meet you. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Because you're like Buddha on the mountaintop, right? So I want to meet you. But it's okay. But what I'm wondering is how do we, because this is the American way here, here's the American coming out
Mhm.
of me, like how do we move across? Like, and I know we move from like level to level, but sometimes people maybe their bandwidth, maybe they're like a 2, 3, and they don't move beyond like 2, 3, which is okay if that's where they're acknowledging, they're aware. You talk about being turned on or like awareness, right? A lot of people don't even know they're in a level 2 or 3. They just like live and die in level 2 or 3, right? They don't know
Right.
anything about it.
Right.
So once women and people listening to this get aware, because this is so beautiful, right? We're like opening their eyes to something new. And once they figure out where they are, if they do want to kind of like get their scale a little wider and move to a 5 or a 6, like how do they go about doing that?
Yeah. So, well, here's the beauty of the model in a way. If they do want to move to a 5 or 6, it's because they're in experiences and circumstances and environments that demand it. That's the beauty of full spectrum resonance. Your home frequency, which you've put for yourself at 5 to 6, is
Yes.
where you get the most energy now. That's all it means. It's what
Mm.
energizes you. So if I was to put you in a situation where you were surrounded by lots of 3 people and maybe you're at a conference with a lot of 3s, it would drain your energy. That's all it means. But if
Mm.
you have full spectrum energy, what it enables, full spectrum resonance, what it enables you to do is go, okay, I'm in this environment or I'm in this relationship with this person. Now, from my whole toolkit of resonance, where do I need to be so I can connect with this person? Right? I can connect strongly with this person, but at the same time, I'm not giving up my own sense of self, right? To connect. Now, that's okay to
Mm.
do that in short bursts of time. In fact, I did that with my mum, who's now deceased. She never got above level 3. And so for me, it was quite draining being in conversations with her because as she got older as well, one of two things happens to us in emotional maturity. We either get really clear that our way is the only way, and you will have all met older people that
Oh,
this is the
yes.
way, right? Or we get very attracted to our opposites and we get curious, we open up and we start exploring things that we've never seen or done before with people that are very different to us, right? And this is part of Carl Jung's work, right? This has been around for a long time.
Hmm.
So, depending if you get more intentional about your level of psychological maturity as well, it feeds into the resonance piece because if you are open and you are curious, then for me now, when I meet people somebody who's really different to me, right? Because we all say when we meet someone who, like when I met you, we just clicked, right? We were just like,
I
yeah,
was like,
okay,
my
this
people.
resonates, right? This is,
Yes.
yeah, there's like a kindred spirit here.
Yeah.
They're easy people. But how do we deal with difference? When we meet someone who is our opposite, what do we do? How do we deal with it? Because it's dissonant. We don't quite communicate well together. We miss each other in conversation. There's so many misunderstandings in what we're saying, especially if we're doing it over technology or text. So that's where the resonance piece comes in because you can go, oh, from their language, I can get a sense of where they are and what they need from me. Therefore, I can give it. So that's where the
Mm.
beauty is. In a way, I want to expand your question a bit because it's not really about your home frequency, but it is in a way for your energy management. Because if you're spending a lot of time outside of your home frequency, life's going to be hard, it's going to be draining. So you want to look for people and environments where you resonate because we can all be in flow then.
Okay, so I have a lot more now. So this is why we joke about, the
Right,
family holidays, right? Where
right,
we go
right,
home and we're like, why do I feel so sapped after like an hour with Aunt Mildred, right? Because
right,
she may be sitting at a 3 and you're at a 5, right?
right.
Or and it can it be draining? Because like you said, the 3, 4, 5, I'm actually looking, I'm cheating everyone. Like I'm in that middle, the transforming the self. Can even a level or two make a big difference in resonance? Like where you're like, wow, you drain me dry.
Yes, it can. And the problem is we get anchored in, right? And this is part of our neuroscience. We get anchored in because in the beliefs in any of the levels, right, we start to look in our world for things that support our beliefs because we have confirmation bias. So we start to do that and then we think everybody is like us, but then we meet people and we realize, oh, they're different. And so we're not actually taught to deal with difference. And I think this is going to be one of the most important things that we need today and into the future of leadership, because right now we confront difference and we try and make people the same as us. Well, that's not going to work. That just causes conflict.
I've tried
So
that. It
how
doesn't
do
work.
we, yeah, it doesn't work. So how do we appreciate difference instead of
Hmm.
tackling it head on?
Okay, so if someone is really interested in this, and this relates to and maybe it was stolen from this. I don't know. I don't want to be disparaging on my coaching school, but I do an assessment called the Energy Leadership Index, which
Yeah,
was done.
Bruce's work.
I'm
So
sorry.
I met Bruce when I first came to the US
Yes.
because I was like, this is so similar to my resonance codes. And this is the beauty, I think, I didn't know he existed. He didn't know I existed.
Okay.
We
Because I was
both
like, wow,
developed
this
our
is
own
so
system.
similar. Yeah. Because he,
Yeah, but he's also built on the chakra system like I did, which is why the similarities are there. So
yeah.
yes.
So he doesn't, I don't, maybe he doesn't talk about it as like poignantly as you do. Right. But it, like the colors are there,
Mm,
the different energetic levels are there.
yep.
But the thing that I like about this, so for all my folks that have done an ELI, and if you haven't, please contact me because it is like game changing
Yeah.
assessment. And then coupled with this, I'm like, wow, like mind blowing.
Yeah.
Because the energy leadership index is more about you, right? So it's more about like your spectrum and like picking or finding your spectrum in your situation. But I like yours too because, and it's a nice compliment because you're talking about your inner workings with other people too and teams and all of this stuff. So I think that they're good complements for one another.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think they're
I
really good.
Well, thank you for saying that because I actually don't know the energy leadership work very well. I think I read the book about 10, 15 years ago when I first came
Yes.
to America. But it's good to hear that we're actually quite complementary because I imagine we are because they're both built on wisdom, energetic traditions. So I did know that much. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I didn't know if you knew, but now I'm like, okay, yeah, they're like related somehow. So okay, so I was going to ask you, but I'm going to ask in general too. So if we are in a situation where home for us in the resident spectrum is like a 4, like you said, and
Mm,
we are working with a coworker or a boss that's like a 2, 3, you say, Jayne, well, this is my legacy work, right? So you have your own business and not everyone does, right? A lot of us are in corporate.
mm,
So how do
yeah.
you deal with that or how do you protect your energy so that you can, you know, stay healthy, happy, sane, all of that kind of stuff? Because some people are, sitting cube to cube with someone that they are not in
Right.
resonance with.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing that I think is amazing about us humans. Once we are aware, once we have an awareness of what's driving us and what's driving somebody else, and we notice the difference, then we have an understanding, which is what communication's all about. So you said there, how do I protect? Right?
Yes.
And that's kind of what we're cultured into. Like, if my energy's draining, I need to protect myself.
Mm,
And I'm not saying you don't. There are some instances where you do, but I think of protection like a semi-permeable membrane. You don't want to close everything out. You just want to let the positive in and leave the negative out there. But what I've learned through working with resonance now for about 20 years is that I don't need to protect anything. Why? Because I'm aware of my own system. I'm also an empath. So, what that means is
mm,
I take on other people's negative energies and I carry it around until I burn out and I'm exhausted, right? I learned this pretty early on. And what that means is at the end of a day, yes, I do have a practice where I clean and cleanse my energy field because otherwise I'm carrying around stuff that is not even mine. So
mm,
the first answer is you may not need to protect. Awareness and understanding could be enough
mm,
because you understand why they're behaving in certain ways. You understand their triggers, you understand their language. It's not personal, right?
mhm,
It's more about them than it is about you, which when you
mhm.
look into most conflicts, people are normally just showing you themselves and what they care most about rather than, connecting in. So, and then the second thing is, once you learn how to manage and cleanse your field, it for a lot of situations where you think you might need protection, you wouldn't because for me now, I feel like things just move through me. I don't hold on to them. And this is where, so many spiritual traditions talk about letting go. Because if I held on to everything that came into my field, I would be exhausted. I'd be ill because we now know that it's linked to physical illness. So knowing what you're carrying around in your field is really important.
So for someone that might be interested in, well, I don't know, Jayne, how do I clear or clean my field or my energies? Like
Yeah.
what recommendations do you have?
Well, some very simple things I'd start with, which is just literally one of the things I do is there's two things. One is a shower. So when I have a shower, I actually envisage the shower coming through my energy field. So we all have seven chakras, and the my level of resonance has an eighth chakra above and then a zero chakra below the feet, which actually goes from heaven to earth in a way. So I just envisage the water coming down, and as it's doing that, it's cleansing my entire system. That's a very simple thing to do at the end of a day.
Mm,
The other thing you can do is put some dead sea salts into a bath and get into that. Salt is very cleansing of your energy in your auric field. So therefore using salt in that way can also cleanse your field. But because it's the intention in a way that we actually see. But we do actually have scientific data now that shows, they've actually done some research where people are ill. All right. And then what they do then is they can actually put them through a dead sea salt and some practices, bring them back, have a look at their field afterwards, and all the holes in the bioenergetic field have been
mm.
healed. So, yeah,
Wow. And I'm thinking as we're talking about like it is time, right, for us to be sacred change makers, which I still want to go back and just hear what does that mean to you? Because I know it is so near and dear, and I want to hear that beautiful definition you have. But I'm thinking old leadership and new leadership. Old leadership, like when our parents and our grandparents, it was probably very level. Not that there weren't folks on the higher end of that spectrum or,
right.
on like that, but very like, okay, you go to work, you do what you're told, like you sit at a desk, like this is what you're doing. And it just isn't. You said that COVID was an awakening. I agree with that. I mean, yes, like things have gone, and there's so many companies. Like, I'm in financial services, and there are so many big companies that are going back to 5-day work weeks. And I just like laugh. I'm like, who are you people? Like, you're obviously not part of our tribe because, like, it is not even about, like, honestly, and Jane, it's beyond, like, are you working from home or not anymore? It's like,
Right.
do you think we're going to go back to the old cadre or box of the way we did things? Like, you're crazy, right? So, do
Right.
you also see it that way? Like, if you look at the past, in terms of like work environments, like, are we also like energetically shifting also along the spectrum too as we're moving along?
Absolutely. I mean, everybody's talking about purpose-driven companies, and unfortunately, at the moment, when you look out into the world, most of the purpose-driven companies have implemented it in their marketing, but not inside their cultures and their way of leading and working. And it doesn't work there. But we've got about 10 to 15 years now of data that shows that purpose-driven companies actually improve the bottom line profits, right? And it's something like it's a lot. It's something like 400%. It's a lot, right? 12 to 1, that was it. And
Wow.
that was some research that was done by Jerry Porras. I think he did that prior to the to COVID, to 2020. I think it was about 2018.
Hmm.
And basically, so now you see, we have to speak the language of where people are. And you're right, we've got like the old style of leadership and the new leadership that's just emerging. And so right now we have to bridge the two. We can't just start going, oh, all right, I'm over here now and I'm going to talk about this,
Right.
because the environments we're in are still in many ways old style, particularly here in the US,
Yes.
because it's behind the European curve, which is further ahead. So it's coming, it's just coming slower because everybody's for profit, more, more, more. That's what matters right now. So we've got to be able to kind of bridge, and so we can still connect and communicate with the old style and then start to evolve it. I don't believe this is a revolution yet. I think we might get there, but it's very much an evolution, meaning that we just take it one step at a time. And just like in the resonance codes, if you're at 1, you can't suddenly go to 8. You've got to do your development through each level so that you're actually fully embodied at each level as you go through. And that's the important piece. So I think that's sometimes what we forget, because a lot of the movements are almost bashing the old way, and that's not going to work. That's just going to cause conflict. So it's
Mm,
how do we bridge? How do we communicate and value from the past what we want to continue,
of
the
course.
threads we want to bring through into the future, what we've learned here, and
Hmm.
what can be valuable in the future, and then really speak to and get intentional about the future of humanity, the future of our world, the future of business, the future of leadership. What do we really want that to be? Because that
Hmm.
is ours to create, and we're creating it now, today. That's not for somebody else to decide. That's for each of us to decide for ourselves.
Mm. So that dovetails to the idea of like, what is a sacred maker? Is that kind of the underpinnings of it, or what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think the easiest way I can describe it, and I'm not going to give you like a long definition, I could, but it for people listening is, especially for leaders, is to ask yourself this simple question. Do you want to be the best leader in the world? Which is kind of speaking to the past in a way. I want to be the best leader in the world. Or do you want to be the best leader for the world? Right? We've
Mm.
only changed one little word there, but it's the real shift that we're in right now is, what are you and your life and your leadership in service of? If it's just self-interest, then you're in the kind of old style way of leading. But this new style now is emerging, and we've got all kinds of movements like conscious capitalism, the B Corp movement, social impact businesses that are starting to lead the way. And the reason they're gaining ground is the marketplace is changing. It is awakening. COVID was a big catalyst for that. It was already going in this trajectory, but that was like an accelerant. And now we have data that shows that if you put two different companies selling the exact same product in front of a consumer or a customer, then I think it was something like 82% will go for the purpose driven company rather than the one that is more old style in its leadership. And so we've
Mm.
now got data that shows those in service of a bigger reason for being in existence, not just to make money for the minority at the top of the organization, but is has value for all, which brings me to my definition of sacred change makers. Sacred is a really interesting word to put in a business title.
I was
And
gonna
when
say.
and when I did, I mean, when I did, I had a lot of fear around it. And I was in a mastermind at the time, and some top leaders turned to me and went, "We love the word change maker, but you can't use the word sacred. You just can't." And it was so important to use it for me because it's almost like reclaiming that word back from organized religions and
Mm.
saying something that's sacred is something that's important. It matters, right? It's kind of something to be held in a different kind of way. And when I ask some of my clients, I'll say to them, if your life was sacred, if your leadership was sacred, what would be different? They come out with the most incredible answers. So, sacred is
Mm.
not just purpose, it's actually a step beyond. You have a calling in this lifetime. What is the work that you came here to do? Why are you here now in this big shift that we're going through in Western society? Why are you here and what is your role to play in that? And then change makers is to get from where we are to where we want to be, we need to implement change, but we need to implement it in a more expansive way than we have been doing. It's not just about the individuals and what they want. It's also about what's necessary today. So it's expanding our
Mm.
processes of change to really look at the way we change in more diverse and expansive ways.
Mm. That's beautiful. And I'm thinking of just letting everyone know, I feel called to tell everyone that you can think. So as we're talking about the resonance codes and this spectrum, you can think you're called in one area, and then all of a sudden, as life goes along, you can be like, then really called. And so I think that's kind of what happened to me in 2019. Because if you would have told me like 10, 15 years ago, like, yeah, you're going to be talking to all these women, amazing women across the world, I'll be like, no, I'm not. I mean, I just am never going to do that. But here I am. And I have been called, and this is even beyond my purpose, right? This is the depths of my soul and what I'm here, for the world, not, I want to be the best leader in the world. And so if there is someone that says, well, that's so nice. I want to find, my purpose. I don't know. You tell me, Jayne, like I did have burnout and then it came to me, right, as I started befriending my intuition again. how can other folks, if they're like, everybody, this is so fun, but I just have a job. Like I don't feel it yet. I haven't discovered it yet. Do you think it's just like you have to give it time and be open? Or what do you think for that? How do they find their purpose work?
Yeah. Well, I think there's two ways to answer this. The first is if you don't find it, then it will find you. And it will
Okay.
usually find you through a trauma like burnout, ill health. You'll
Mm,
find yourself maybe in a hospital bed with an awful lot of space in your life to think that you didn't have
mhm,
before. That's what happened to me, right? I was so busy. We're so busy in our lives today. We're overloaded with information. We don't have space, right, to really
mhm,
listen to ourselves, to others, to life, right? So,
mhm.
yes, you're right. It's slowing down, it's creating space. And I had one client, she was like this meditation thing, I just can't get it. Like, what do you mean sit with myself? Like, what? Like, and that's because, and so just connecting with it, go out into nature. Everybody, I more or less guarantee everybody will have had an experience of awe at some point. You know,
Mhm,
that a beautiful sunset, holding their child for the first time, looking into the eyes of their baby, right? Whatever it is, you'll
mhm,
have had a moment where you kind of go beyond the physical plane of life and you get a sense there's something greater at work here,
mhm,
right? And it could be God, it could, you know, if you're in a religious organization, it could be God, it could be whatever you think that source is. But it's connecting beyond the self to something bigger. And a lot of people, I do have some like meditations and processes that get people into a practice, which is really just being with yourself, like this client said to me, like, I don't know what you mean. Like, what do you mean the stillness within? There is no stillness within. It's chaos in there, right? That kind of thing.
uh,
But it's literally just be quiet. And one of the things I love to do
mm,
is to go and sit in nature, sit with my back to a tree. In the indigenous cultures, they call the trees the elders, the old ones, right? Go and sit amongst the tall ones, and you'll have some ideas, some insights, some intuitions that you won't have had before. And it'll start slowly, but it is just that connection back to self. We've all lost our soul in the modern world. So it's
mm,
about connecting back within to yourself, and through that, you'll find what matters most to you. And you may not be living that now. For some people, there's a big gap between the life they're living and the life that feels more resonant for them. And for others, it's very close, you know, but find out what it is for you, because if you've got a big gap, life isn't good. Life is hard. Life is
mhm.
draining. So that's where the energy piece really comes back in. Because if you don't live in resonance with the deepest parts of you, life is hard, really hard.
Hmm. And I will tell everyone also, you can be on a path to resonance, right? So some people have this like awakening and then they just wake up and then they're awake and then they just like go to that resonant place.
Yeah.
Some people like me, I've had resistance where I'm like, I'm not going to do a podcast. Oh, yeah, you are. I'm not going to coach women. Oh, yeah, you are. Like I've had like resistance, all types of stuff. And
Right.
it does make it harder. I'm not going to pull any punches there, but I'm on a path to resonance. Remember, I said, like, I'm baby woo, like I'm baby woo. I'm like accepting these little parts of myself along the path to resonance. And I'm letting all of my like we talked about perfectionism, Jane, and I've got a lot of women that are high ambitious perfectionist, all of the women. I want to share compassion with you today that you can be on the path. You can be on the path of the resonant spectrum. You can be on the path to resonant like in your whole life. And we're giving you all the love and compassion to do that. You don't arrive. You have your journey and you follow the steps in your path.
And I think you've said something very, very important there, Jen, because I want to underline I'm on a path to resonance. We all are. That's what life is. There is
Mhm.
no destination. There's no end game here. It's actually a journey. And once you realize you're on a journey and you get to kind of get intentional about what that journey is going to be for you, then I think for me anyway, some of the pressures just fell away. And once I
Mhm.
learned to trust myself and trust my life, right? The two things are slightly different, but I listen to myself and I also listen to my life. Like, what's it bringing to me? Because if Jane's head gets engaged, like, I can be like a powerhouse at 100 miles an hour and go off in a direction. But
Mhm.
if life continuously shows me that that direction is not the direction for me, because perhaps people cancel appointments, perhaps, I just keep getting the door shut in my face, I have to listen to that. It's not about the masculine pushing through. It's also about the feminine and listening and letting go and getting back on my path, aligning with my path that will work and will flow, because that's the ultimate goal of resonance is
Mm.
in every being compassionate with myself when things don't go the way I think they're going to. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I sit in my life and I think, this isn't the life I ordered. Like, what's
It's
this?
true. Like, take
Right?
this
This
back. This
isn't
isn't
it.
right. Yeah.
This isn't it. But it's not that. It's just like, and then you said another word, acceptance. Can I accept where I am? Can I live right here now in this moment? Can I accept everything that's gone before and anything that might come in the future? Can I be here now? Because now is the only place I actually have to live. Because so many of us are afraid for the future, and that stops us being here now. Or we feel guilty about the past, and that stops us being here now. So everything's just an experiment. None of us know what we're doing. We're just doing the best we can with what we've got in any
Well,
moment.
and yeah, and we use the tools we have, like the resonant
Yeah,
codes and
yeah.
your podcast, the Sacred Changemakers podcast, so,
Mm,
plug for that. And obviously Brave Women at Work. So I really
yeah,
appreciate you we just want to share as much love and compassion with you
yeah.
as we close, because there is no arrival, it's just the journey itself, and it's learning to enjoy the journey. I was
Yes,
always like, I got to get there. I got to get there. I got to
yes,
get there.
I
And then I'll be
was.
happy. And I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't work, because when I get there, then I'm not happy,
No, I'm
right?
not
So,
happy. Yeah.
exactly. Oh boy. All right. Well, we'll close out with these couple questions here. So, what are 1 to 2 ways? Now we're going to flip it, right? We talked about sacred change makers. What are 1 to 2 ways that women can be braver at work? We're going to use my business name with the word bravery.
Yeah. I think bravery at work sometimes is standing up for yourself in a way that you might think might upset other people, but be you at work. Bring all of you to work. Don't
Mm,
leave your emotions outside because you think that people aren't going to respond well to them. Bring all of you to work because that matters that you do that. Embody what matters most. So just be yourself.
mm, mm. That is so good. And I also want to underline what you said. And there's a book on this. That's so weird. You said Be Here Now. There's a book called Be Here Now, which we'll put in the show notes as well, as a resource for our readers. And so, how can women or all listeners find you and your work online?
Yeah, just go to sacredchangemakers.com or look me up on any of the social media platforms. Luckily, I've got a very unusual name, Jayne Warrilow. So if you search my name, you'll find an awful lot of me on different social media platforms. If you find the Australian gymnast, that's not me. There's only two of us.
Okay, so she's not flipping like around Instagram. So if you see
Unfortunately,
someone,
not.
no, not at this point, maybe before, but not now. So thank you, Jayne, so much. It's been such a joy. And I say this periodically, but this is so fun, with the podcasting world, is that, someone will introduce us and then it just kind of dominoes. And I've met some of the most amazing friends in my life through this medium. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, Jen, thank you. I mean, you're such a lovely interview. You hold space so well. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Well, that's a wrap on my discussion with Jayne today. I hope you found our conversation valuable and inspiring. As a reminder, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast in Apple Podcasts and Spotify. The show is also available on any other podcast platform you enjoy. Until next time, show up, be a sacred changemaker, and be brave.